Okay, we'll now move to our 9:50 timed item. This is a presentation on wildfire preparedness and mitigation activities. We have a number of presenters today. Thank you very much, and you can begin, Vanessa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Gustafson and members of the board. Sarah Poindexter with the County Executive Office, and I'm here this morning to introduce the wildfire preparedness presentation. This morning you'll be hearing from CAL FIRE Unit Chief Brian Estes, along with Sheriff's Captain Shane Wright and Assistant Director of Emergency Services Dave Atkinson, as they provide you with a comprehensive overview of all of the activities across the county in preparation for wildfire season. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Estes to kick off the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, good morning, Chair Gustafson, members of the board. Brian Estes, the County Fire Chief, and thank you. As always, this time of year, we are always honored to be able to come here and give you sometimes a preparedness presentation when we do it a little earlier in this year. And this year, given the time of year, we're going to kind of talk about preparedness, but also a little bit of an update as to where we are right now in comparison to past years. And for myself, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where we've been and where we are and where we're going into the future. And the first thing I wanted to do is look at a little snapshot from our fire season in 2021, because I think it kind of prepares us for what we're looking forward into the future. Across the state last year, we had over 8,000 wildland fires in the state of California. I think to put that into perspective, our agency statewide ran almost 600,000 calls for emergency service across the state. So 8,300 of those were wildland fires. And I think that's relative with any fire and emergency service delivery is, you know, the large scale of what we do is maybe not wildland fires. And there's a lot of good prevention efforts and a lot of good preparatory efforts that go into that across our county. But the one thing about wildland fires is they really demand the biggest amount of resources. That one call takes a huge amount of resources from across all of our allied agencies, both fire and law enforcement, and that's one of the things we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Across the state last year, we had almost 2.5 million acres burned in those wildland fires, and over 3,600 structures were destroyed. Our agency dropped over 17 million gallons of retardant from aircraft, and we arrested 121 arsonists in the state of California. As I've talked about before, we have one of the most robust and arguably the best mutual aid systems probably in the world, that bringing local and state firefighting emergency services agencies together. But it's not cheap in the state of California. And as an example, there was over $1.1 billion expended last year just in the suppression of those fires. So these next two graphs give you a real quick glimpse into where we sit over the last 5 years of extreme drought in the state of California versus our recorded history, which goes back to 1932 when we first started recording that history. So if you look at the gray slice there, and this first graph is representing the top 20 largest wildfires in California's history. If you look at that small gray slice, that represents the years 1932 through 1999. And then the blue slice and the orange slice represent 2000 through 2019. So that's a tremendous amount of our of that generation or that 100-year history that is identified. And then over half of the largest 20 fires that burned in the state of California burned in 2020 and 2021. That's the reality of what we're facing today in California. This next graph shows a similar trend, but it's the top 20 most destructive wildfires, and those are fires where either property or life were destroyed. Again, 1932 through 1999, 2000 through 2009, a little bit higher in 2021, but the big one there is that 10-year period between 10 and 19, punctuated by the severe drought in California, and really the majority of that being the Camp Fire in Paradise, where almost 20,000 structures were destroyed. A couple of important notes about this slide is that in CAL FIRE, County Fire, the protection of life and property is always going to take the #1 priority. Our mission is to prevent or suppress 95% of new wildland fires and keep them at 10 acres or less. The reason for that is that we all protect private property, your land, and the private land of our citizens here in Placer County. We don't manage public land, so we have a very clean, very clear suppression mission in our agency and in our culture. And when we do fuel reduction efforts, we have to make sure those are centered around our objectives to protect communities and life. And I think we've done a really good job of prioritizing those efforts here in Placer County. So as I take those statistics and bring them from a statewide aspect down to Placer County, last year we had 361 wildland fires across our unit. About 200 of those ignitions occurred right here in Placer County. We had over 4,800 acres burn. The majority of that was due to the river fire and then also the bridge fire later in the year. Our 5-year average is about 4,200 acres burned in the area, so we're pretty much on average with that. Last year was much higher on the amount of structures that were destroyed, and again, that was directly related to the river fire. And unfortunately, we still do have multiple arson investigations occurring in our region as I speak today. Our Grass Valley Emergency Command Center dispatched 39,000 911 EMS and fire calls in 2021, generating over 67,000 responses. This averages just under 100 calls per day, and your Placer County Fire Department responded to over 12,000 calls for service across our county, with about $7 billion in assessed value across the region. So some lessons that we've learned in 2021 as we move forward. Our fuel reduction efforts made really significant differences. They allowed us to make tactical and strategic decisions based on where we knew that we had good fuel reduction efforts around those communities and protecting those communities. Our unified command philosophy that we've embraced and will still continue to embrace in the years future is critical to our success. And even tomorrow, you will see our annual unified command training between the Sheriff's Office, County Fire, and OES, and it's really one of our most integral trainings of the year that we do. We were successful in accruing almost $4 million in CAL FIRE funding to continue Phase 2 of the North Fork of the American Shaded Fuel Breaks from Colfax down to the city of Auburn. As all of you know, we were able to secure $1 million in direct funding specific to the storm damage from December of 2021, and those efforts are ongoing right now in some of the hardest hit areas of the county. And we work closely with our allied county departments to ensure that any new development across the western end of the county, fire prevention and fire suppression efforts are key in our decision making. On the state side, we are at peak staffing and have been since mid-May. Our Type 2 helicopter is in place at Auburn headquarters and fully in service. And if the budget holds as we are hoping it does, we will see a Type 1 helicopter fully staffed right after July 1st at the Truckee Airport, available to the entirety of Placer and Nevada counties. Our burn suspension is obviously in effect, and we're hoping that that budget holds with significant augmentation funding across our region. We talked about the unified command philosophy, our continued commitment to evacuation planning and efforts, which we work very closely with both the SO and OES on, and evacuation drills as well with our community. We could not do anything or be successful in what we do without the support of our community engagement and the commitment from the people here in the county in the protection of their communities and homes. And our leadership and support from all of you, the County Board of Supervisors and our departments across the county, is incredibly important to us as the fire department, our relationships with our allied agencies, and again, that buy-in from the communities and our leveraging of state and county resources to bring an effective and efficient fire service model to our county. So with that, I appreciate your time as always. I think I'll turn it over to Captain Wright now, and then maybe we can answer some questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome, Captain.
Good morning, everybody. Shane Wright, Placer County Sheriff's Office. I'm always happy here to present this every year and let the Board of Supervisors and the constituents know where we stand in current operations and mass notification and other practices that we have as we mitigate these types of complex incidents. So as the chief said, tomorrow we have our law enforcement, Placer County law enforcement agency and partners, as well as the Sheriff's Office, CAL FIRE, Placer County Fire, and the rest of the fire agencies in the county, working through tabletop exercises, actually as they would at a command post, as they mitigate all sorts of different hazards that we typically encounter. One big part of that, as you can see, the Placer County GIS and dispatchers being involved, is the timely and accurate notification, not just to our stakeholders and partners, but the constituents as well. As we saw in the River Fire, PIO's social media team and the unified command that we're working through obviously work through evacuation orders, warnings, as well as posting it on maps. So during the River Fire, I think we had over 100 map updates. Our crime analysis unit worked using GIS to work on this map. You can clearly see, and this is an actual map of the River Fire. Traditionally and historically, we used roads as a way to provide context of the impacted areas. And you can clearly see on this map that the red zone is evacuation order. The green is this is a little bit later in the incident, for repopulation. And then orange, which is not noted on this map, is the evacuation warning areas. One of the things that we're really proud of is the all hazard planning maps. They're extremely time intensive. We started with Colfax, which coincidentally was the first time they were used on the River Fire. They include traffic control points, temporary refuge areas, all the agency contacts responsible for that area, landmarks, critical infrastructure, and commonly used frequencies of that area. So ultimately, these maps are designed not only for the local cooperators, but they're also designed for anybody to come in mutual aid-wise from Shasta County to San Diego and be able to get a good awareness of the area that they're working in. About 5 years ago, California Office of Emergency Services did a study, and they came up with the best terminology for mass notification. It was shortly after that report was published that your sheriff's office moved to evacuation order, evacuation warning, and shelter in place as common terminology. We've had a lot of success with this, and it has provided a clear direction to the public on the incidents where we have issued mass notifications. So as far as the tools that we use or have access to for mass notification, through Everbridge, our third-party mass notification vendor, we have wireless emergency alerts, which we can do. We frequently use social media platforms. We also use our technology in the cars and helicopters for public announcements. About 3 years ago, we implemented the high-low siren, which here in Placer County is, if you can hear that high-low siren, evacuate immediately. And then on top of that, regardless of what mass notification tool works, we're always going to go door to door for accountability. Additional preparation on the sheriff's office side, we have a quick response team, and ultimately the expectations are for deputies on duty and off duty to be en route to an incident within 45 minutes. The take-home car program, which I'll use the River Fire as an example, within 1 hour, we had 56 logged on units on scene. And so you can pretty much count on about 85 personnel because some of those units are doubled, which really helped us out on displacing that many people in that shorter period of time. The mobile command vehicle is ultimately the same technology, tools, and resources that a small to medium-sized police department would have. It supports us in communication as well as our planning. So not just during the wildland season, but we're continually working with our partners developing muscle memory through repetition on much lower scale incidents, working through going back to all those all-hazard incidents that they're going to be preparing for tomorrow. And then we're always working on getting more and more personal protective equipment, NOMEX, and other things to provide the ultimate safety for the deputies that are on scene. And I'll be happy to answer any questions after Dave gets done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Board. Dave Atkinson, Assistant Director of Emergency Services. Appreciate the opportunity to get up and speak this morning, especially with esteemed colleagues here. A theme we want to highlight as part of this presentation is collaboration. And sometimes this is referred to as the whole of community approach. But the idea that creating a resilient community is a shared responsibility. It's not something that can just be done by the government, but something that needs to be done by folks working together, whether it's individuals, businesses, of course, government agencies, community level groups, and of course, all levels of government. And we're fortunate to have many, many collaborations that I'll highlight as part of the presentation this morning. Sometimes when the conditions are right, collaborations can turn into partnerships. And again, I'm pleased that we have many of those that are working in this area. As Chief mentioned, we have the $1 million direct funding grant that we were able to put in play with a partnership with Placer RCD and the Department of Public Works. And I'm pleased to report that as of 2 weeks ago, they've managed to treat over 11 miles of high priority ingress-egress roadways in our high severity fire zone areas. Other collaborations we have going, of course, is probation and Placer RCD, and we'll be pleased to bring back a report to your board actually next meeting to talk about the successes of the CHIPPR program. But I can give you just a little preview of that in terms of 136 probation clients have actually been served in an alternative sentencing capacity as part of that program. And just in the 10 months that the pilot program has been in play, thanks to the support of your board, they've served 844 requests for service. And actually right up until the winter storm, what was a several month backlog had actually been brought down to just about a week, right before the storm, of course, and now backlog's back up as there's still a lot of work to do out there for that. And then, of course, as was mentioned, law enforcement and fire have a long history in this county of their partnership. Again, that'll be on display tomorrow at the Unified Training. And then also wanted to mention too, Placer OES has been busy with some other partnerships, including the California Fire Safe Council. And I'm pleased to report that we will be bringing a wildfire assessment program, Train the Trainer course, to Placer County. Will be one of 3 that'll be held in the state for the benefit of our residents. Obviously, government wants to do our part, whether it's county departments such as Public Works, again, adding green waste drop-off days at the Forest Hill Transfer Station, for example, or county parks closing Hidden Falls either for those extreme heat days or those red flag days. And then, of course, we get that same level of partnership from our state and sometimes our federal agencies as well. As Chief mentioned and as Captain Wright mentioned, also we want to provide support to our first responders, and so we make full use of federal grant programs such as the Homeland Security Grant Program to bring our first responder much needed protective equipment, communications equipment, special technical equipment, all to make sure that they can do their jobs effectively and efficiently. Another example of some government actions is actually a unique collaboration with the Farm Advisor and the Sheriff and Fire in what's called the Ag Pass program. The concept being that we have commercial interests that have a lot of agricultural values at risk at play. When fire conditions permit, we want to provide an opportunity for them to go back in and continue to take care of those economic interests because they're so very important to our county and want to make sure people have that opportunity, but obviously only when it's a safe and effective to do so. Of course, property owner responsibility, and you've heard a lot over the years about home hardening, defensible space, some new things that are happening. The Department of Insurance and CAL FIRE have been working on a collaboration to take some steps to try to alleviate some of the fire insurance issues that, of course, we've been experiencing in the state. A new construct called the Safer from Wildfire program is out, and by working on these 3 steps in terms of protecting your structure, or think of that as home hardening, protecting your immediate surroundings, think of that as defensible space, and of course working together as a community. And an example of that is the Firewise program that we have here in Placer County. All of those will lead towards some reductions in your fire insurance policy, which are obviously desperately needed right now. Community involvement. Again, very proud of the level of community involvement that we have here in Placer County. With your board's support, we have a very robust Firewise community recognition program. And actually, I'm pleased to report that in 2020, we had 48 recognized communities, 2021, 62, and as of yesterday, when we pulled the report, we are at 72. So a steady growth in that program. It will now reap some additional benefits. As I mentioned, that Safer from Wildfire construct that the Department of Insurance is working on will actually help those folks see some benefits in their wildfire insurance. We have very robust fire safe councils as well. We have several of them in the county. Again, many of those have direct support from your board, and we appreciate that very much. Some examples of the work that they're doing: the Greater Lincoln Fire Safe Council has had a program for many years where they send out letters encouraging property owners to put in disc lines at their property edges. And so these provide a small fire break, if you will, and my understanding is those have on several occasions been a factor in stopping those large grass fires that you'll see down in the western low end of the county from getting too far. So that's very important. We also have something unique in Placer County called the Fire Safe Alliance. This is a kind of a next tier collaboration, if you will. Includes some of our federal and state partners. And as an example, we had CAL FIRE and Department of Insurance on at our last meeting to talk about that Safer from Wildfire construct that's coming out that's really going to be very important. And then, of course, we have a number of volunteer organizations in this county, and something that we're working on with the Truckee Tahoe Conservative and also the Placer County Community Foundation is the concept of what's called a COAD, or sometimes referred to as a VOAD, which is Community Organizations Active in Disaster. The idea being that there's no way with these huge incidents these days that government can possibly do everything, and that we sometimes are challenged or limited in the things that we can do for whatever reason, whereas volunteer organizations have the ability just to provide a greater depth of services, and sometimes can provide the services that government just can't. And so we're working hard to put something together here in the next couple of months to get us in better shape for the fire season. And we really appreciate our partnership with Health and Human Services and with Tahoe Truckee and with Placer Community Foundation working on those efforts. Outreach and education is obviously a big part of what we want to be doing. Again, we look to our fire safe councils and the Fire Safe Alliance. As I mentioned, many of them do educational presentations. The Greater Auburn Fire Safe Council has a monthly lunchtime Zoom lunch and learn call to talk about things like Firewise, home hardening, defensible space, insurance, just topics of interest. We're also out at the home shows. We'll be at the Placer County Fair, actually looking forward to that. Hopefully it won't be too hot this weekend. And then, of course, we're very successful with our Wildfire Preparedness Day events this year. Many of the fire safe councils, with some support from CAL FIRE and the local fire departments, put on some green waste collection events and, of course, some educational opportunities, and we're very pleased with how that went. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the great work that PIO and IT have been doing lately to really put together a great Ready Placer webpage, and then a new addition to that lineup is our Ready Placer Mapping Hub. As we just get more sophisticated and things become more graphical and interactive, looking to provide just better clarity and understanding of where things are happening, where people are at in relationship to the things that are happening, help us determine areas maybe where there's some gaps in what we're doing. And so that Ready Placer Mapping Hub is going to be a vital piece of that. And then, of course, we never want to forget that please, folks, if you have not signed up for Placer Alert, please do so. I wanted to wrap up the presentation with just a brief reminder of the things we'd like people to be doing as they get ready for whatever's going to come this summer. And I'll take you through that in kind of the same way that we do it here in emergency management. So the first part of that is just understanding your hazards. And just up here is a list of just some things that I think are not too far of a stretch of the imagination of things that we can expect over the summer, whether it's drought, heat, wildfire, smoke, whatever it might be, power outages, whether it's PSPS or rolling blackouts or just somebody happens to hit a power pole. Those are all very likely things. And so what we want folks to do is just think about your own situation, where are you in the county, and what you might expect. And there's a whole host of resources out there from CAL FIRE and Ready Placer and a whole bunch of places just for you to really, if you want to dive as deep as you want about the hazards that you might face. One way you can always do that is just think back. This is just a list of the last 12 months of things that we have encountered here in Placer County. Of course, you've heard a bit about the bridge fire and the river fire. We were fortunate not to have any PSPSs last year, but we'll see what the future holds this year. PG&E has recently engaged what they're calling those enhanced settings on some of their lines, and I think we saw an outage here in Auburn just a couple of days ago actually on that. And of course, wildfire smoke, even if we don't have a fire here in the county, as we all know, unfortunately, it can travel hundreds of miles and really impact things. And as we've already seen a couple weeks ago, the extreme heat, and then of course we can't forget about the winter storm that we just faced. So once you know your risk, then it's about understanding your vulnerabilities. And so one way I like to explain this to people is just think about the persons, places, and things in your life that are important to you, whether it's you, your family, your children, maybe some parents, your neighbor, coworkers, your members of your church community, whatever it might be. Who are the people in your life that are important to you that you want to be planning for? And then think about the places where you're going to be. Home, work, children at school, maybe you have parents at some kind of dependent care situation. Don't forget about your vacations, right? Maybe you're out and about in your RV. And then the things that might be important as well, right? Your car, perhaps some valuables, some family heirlooms, whatever those things are, right? So think about all of those things. And then the trick here is wherever you're going to see it, wherever a hazard might occur, and one of these things that's important to you are going to intersect or they might happen at the same time, that's the things you want to plan for. And so that's where we really want you to make a plan. And something, unfortunately, that we have to think about these days, especially over the summer, is the possibility that multiple things may occur at the same time. A couple years ago, we had the possibility of PSPSs, extreme heat, and wildfire smoke all happening at the same time. And just like we had to have a plan for how we were going to deal with those things here at the county level, we want our residents to do the exact same thing. And we want you to do that whether you're at home or work or school or wherever you might be and wherever things are that are important to you or people that are important to you are at, right? And you need to have plans for all the kind of contingencies. How are you going to get emergency notifications? How are you going to communicate with your family? How are you going to get word to perhaps to your children who might be at a friend's house and that you can't get to them, but that they're safe, right? Those are all the kind of things we want you to be working and thinking about and making a plan for. And then, of course, evacuations and sheltering in place, right? You should have a go plan and you should have a stay plan, right? We learned during the winter storms how important it is to be prepared to not go anywhere, right? We talk so much about your go bag and making sure your gas tank is full, but it's equally as important to be prepared to just hunker down at home and food, water, whatever those things might be that you need to be comfortable and healthy. And then, of course, we want you to take action, right? So you've done the work, you've done all the planning, and now we want you to take action. And we talk a lot about fire insurance, but there's so many other aspects to insurance, and your savings and your all of those things are oh so important, right? And your documentation. Do you know where the deed to your house is? Do you have your children's birth certificates? Whatever those important papers are, right? Are you going to make copies? Are you going to upload them to the cloud? Are you going to put them on a flash drive? What about grandma's pictures that you scanned a few years ago? Where's that hard drive, right? All those things, you need to be prepared to manage that risk and have a plan for how you want to do that. And again, so many tips for that at Ready Placer, at readyforwildfire.org. There's a lot of resources out there, and we want to make sure those are available to you. We've talked obviously a lot about defensible space, home hardening, all of those kinds of things. Something we don't talk about much, but always make sure that you can get in and out of your property, right? Can that fire truck or that ambulance or that sheriff's vehicle, can it get into your property when it's needed to be? Can they find your property? Is your address easily readable in the dark, in the smoke? Can they find you if you'd make that 911 call? Can that deputy who maybe is from Shasta County or wherever, can they find you? And without that well-marked address, they may not be able to be. So do those things so that those first responders can help you if needed. And then take action, right? Protect yourself. Even today, it's going to be warm outside. You know, get yourself plugged into whatever kind of news feed or however you get good information that you feel good with about the weather, wildfire conditions, power outages, and of course, air quality, right? You want to know when you start your day, hey, today is going to be a bad day. Maybe today's not the day we're going to go. We're going to go to the pool. We're going to go to the museum instead because we're going to be inside. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you have a plan for getting those emergency notifications, whether it's TV and radio, social media, internet. There's even warning flag programs now for either red flag, and the Air Pollution District now has a program for flags that help with air quality. Just be sure that you have a plan, and then you have a backup plan, and you have a backup to your backup plan for how you're going to get those notifications. I know a lot of people turn their phones off at night, and I can appreciate that, but maybe during red flags is the time when maybe you leave your phone on. Maybe you leave it plugged in so it's always charged. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, if you have not signed up for Placer Alert, please do so. Many people who think they have a landline actually do not, and they may not actually be covered what would be considered the traditional reverse 911 system. And so you have to opt in, which means you have to sign up. So just so important to do that. And that concludes my part of the presentation, Chair. Appreciate it, and I think we'll all be available for questions.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. And Chief and Captain Wright, appreciate it. Questions, board members? Yes, Bonnie.
Thank you. Chief, I have a question. Actually, maybe I'm not sure which of the two of you it is, but in regards to mass notification, I guess it's the sheriff's office, and I wasn't intimately involved, but I recall during the river fire, there was an issue with residents in Placer County having a different notification than the Nevada County residents and concern about that. Have we been able to address that or get on the same system as others? Or if you can give me an update, that would be great.
Sure. So I think that the confusion began with another partner using the wireless emergency alert system, which basically travels, I've heard all the way up to 12, 20 miles, and everybody in that area is going to get that evacuation order, warning, whatever that case is that partner sent out. In that alert, it guided folks to a link of our partners. That partner is the only neighboring county that uses a third-party vendor. The third-party vendor that was used for that mass notification mapping GIS program, they're the only ones that have it. We're interoperable with the balance of our surrounding neighboring counties. And we also looked into this third-party vendor probably for the last 2 years. I think it's going to be a great program one day, but it does not operate with our current Everbridge system. There's a lot of redundancy in that program, and it's not quite there yet to where it's palatable for us at this point. So basically going back to the original alert that went out, coupled with a third-party vendor that they subscribed to that we did not, that's where that confusion came from.
Okay, so hopefully that'll be able to be mitigated in the future, right?
Sure.
I'm sure you've talked about it to figure out how to mitigate some challenges like that.
Yes, so I think that one of the other things that we've thrown in is a lot earlier on working with our GIS in-house folks, as well as dispatchers and the command post, to get those GIS maps published with the link as soon as we possibly can.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
And then one other item, Dave, I don't know if this actually got filtered down to you, But earlier this year, I think back in February, I was at a CSAC conference, Sacramento State Association of Counties, and one of the vendors, actually a couple of vendors that are partners with CSAC, one of them actually provides contract services for counties when there is a mass incident. And they actually will be on retainer with counties, and so if there is for example, wildfire, and you and your team are working with the sheriff's office and the fire department and taking care of all of that, they can come in and address the needs on getting funding from the feds and the state and activating all of that. So I'm not sure if you had received that information. I want to make sure I, get it to you, and I do think it's worth looking at to see if we can have one of those companies on retainer. So unfortunately, not necessarily if, but likely when we have a major incident, whether it's a wildfire or a flood, we have another entity that can come in and do help us with the bulk of the work that needs to get addressed.
Absolutely, and I did get that word, and it is something we're looking at. Starting to work with procurement, trying to understand, what would the framework need to be in order to put something like that in place, and of course, where funding would come from for the retainer and things like that, and how that all would work. And just working with council too, want to make sure that we don't put any of our potential, emergency funding or that at risk either. So just understanding how all of that works to make sure that we're doing it just the right way.
Sure, and I could be wrong. I don't know if it actually costs anything up front. That's
Right.
my understanding.
Right.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Supervisor Holmes?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to thank you all for the very informative presentation. Gives us the information that we need to impart to our citizens. And the collaboration is outstanding. As evidenced, like tomorrow, you'll have that unified command. Chief, I have a couple comments, if you'll please come. Last week, I was in Nevada County. I serve as delegate to the Rural County Representatives of California. And the chair of the Nevada County Board of Supervisors, Chair Dan Miller, is also the chair of the RCRC. And we had a meeting two-day meeting up in Nevada County. And one of the tours they went on was the ECC in
Grass Valley, yep.
Grass Valley. And I had to leave because I had to go to another meeting down here that I had to be part of for a special meeting. But I can't tell you how impressed the supervisors from the counties. We had supervisors from Humboldt, Modoc, clear down into Mono County attending this event. And when I came back to the meeting after the tour, they were so impressed. They grabbed me and said, "Boy, that was the highlight of their meeting of the whole day, the whole meeting." So I just want to thank you for putting on that display of what we do in Placer County and in the unit. It was really, really impressive, and it made a lot of people understand how important your office is for CAL FIRE. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. Appreciate you saying that.
Supervisor Jones?
Yes, thank you all for a great report. Regarding notification of residents, that on one of your last slides, you're talking about the placeralert.org to sign up and opt in for that. I'm just wondering, how are you getting that message out to everyone in the kind of rural, high fire risk areas?
So we do our very best to get it out through multiple means, whether it's our social media posts, we put it in newsletters. There was even a program, I think the last couple of years, to put it in the tax mailings that went out. There was a little insert, kind of old school, to put it in the flyer there. So we'll be at the fair again, the home show. Pretty much every flyer, every piece of anything that we put out has Placer Alert on there, because it is just so important. If you don't do anything else, we want you to be able to get those emergency notifications. Obviously, there's a lot of things we want you to do, but if that's that one thing, that's what we want you to do.
Is the Placer Alert, is that for any fires that are starting, say for my residents that live in around Folsom Lake? Because it's not a forest, as you know, but it is a lot of dry grass.
I'll start the conversation. Let me have Captain Wright. So Placer Alert is the branding that we have put around The alert and warning system that we use, the name of the software is called Everbridge. It does a lot of things. One of the things it does is it does traditional reverse 911, where from the phone company, every 6 months we get a list of all of the landlines. They load that up into the system. You add to that, though, anyone who signs up, my cell phone, your cell phone, maybe your voice over IP, someone says, I want that phone number in, those get added to it. Sheriff's Dispatch will use that for, and they use it for all types of alert and warning, whether it's a wildfire, whether it's a possible propane leak, or it's a shelter in place because there's somebody out there that we don't want you to accidentally bump into. So it's the county-wide alert and notification system that's run by our sheriff's office.
Okay, so, and I'm just wondering, have you thought about doing some kind of like a postcard campaign for those that are out in rural areas, that...
We are always looking for opportunities to reach folks, so, that's something we'd be happy to
I know
look at.
Miranda's shop, she's
Right.
done postcard notifications on a number of things that, make it flashy so people actually look.
Right, we actually were able to do that as part of the disking program, actually, just to do something a little flashier than a letter, with the hopes that maybe somebody will take that extra 5 seconds and actually read it, and not just take it straight.
I hate to say it, but I don't think people read the stuff that comes in their tax bill after they get the heart failure from the
Indeed.
dollar amount on the front.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Supervisor Jones. I had a question, Chief, if you don't mind. This morning, because I get up early and drive down the hill, I was listening to Cap Radio, and they were reporting a story on an investigation on CAL FIRE not being as proactive in prevention. While I understood that was a statewide program, all I've seen since I've been on this board is how proactive CAL FIRE has been in our region and the resources you've brought to bear. And I wanted to first commend you, because I think we're outside of that report with our results and what efforts have been going on. But if you had any other insights on that, I thought it would be good for our constituents to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I actually was reading that just as I walked in the door this morning. And, as a large agency, you take a lot of criticism, some constructive, some not, from a myriad of different elements across the state. And, it's important to reference some of the context to that article. Most of the reference from the one gentleman there harkens to, frankly, a very different era in our department. The state of California has evolved over the last 25 years since that gentleman was in charge of our department, and he was not a fire and emergency professional. He was a political appointee, and certainly has his opinions about where the department should have been or should be now. The fact of the matter is we, as I've said many times before, we often struggle with trying to maintain a strong preventative effort while protecting private lands and respecting the private property laws in California. And not managing public lands, it's much more complicated for us to actually affect some of those projects. So where I think we do a really, really great job of that is in two things. Number one, working in collaborative projects with the county, with federal agencies, with allied agencies, so that we can breach those boundary lines. But more importantly, and I think the historical reference of our department is in the public education, the community engagement and involvement, and then funneling those grant dollars into the community action groups like our RCD and Fire Safe Councils and the Fire Alliance, and those that can take those monies and really put them to work and affect those projects on the ground. And I think in Placer County, just the very fact that we had one of the governor's Priority 35 projects that we are in phase 2 of, and we will complete over that 5-year period, tying in Colfax to the city of Auburn, and frankly having to stretch over 300 different private landowner properties and getting permission to work on those properties. It's a tremendous effort. We have seen a depletion in some of our resources, particularly our our inmate hand crew program has had a decimating effect on our ability to put resources on the ground for fuels reduction and fire prevention efforts. And lastly, our fire suppression and emergency response mission has always been and will always be the priority of our agency. It doesn't lessen the prevention message at all, or the preventative message, and our commitment to fuels reduction, it will always remain high, but the protection of life and property is always paramount in my decision-making process and my objectives as the fire chief. So,
Well, I appreciate that. I know with your leadership as well as our county leadership and our board's support, hiring a regional forest health coordinator, first in the state, I believe, at a county level, our hazardous vegetation ordinance and other tools to try to encourage people to defend not only their own home, but to defend our communities against wildfire. Going to Dave's point about we need to be prepared and we need to take action, not only to prepare our homes, but to prepare for our own safety. Really appreciate the efforts of the resources you've brought and helped us secure for Placer County residents to defend our communities. And I found the story a bit one-sided, listening to it, knowing how hard you are all working to fund those grants, how much the governor has invested through you into protecting our communities. And I just wanted to make sure I said something this morning since I was listening to that article, or that story coming down. And then I had a quick question for Captain Wright. As you know, I've spoken with all three of you that evacuation in our rural communities is a huge issue of concern. People are afraid, and we certainly had issues after the Camp Fire and after, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the Santa Rosa fire, Coffee Park area.
Kincaid and
Tubbs Fire. Sorry, I forget the names. We've had way too many fires now. Where people were unable to get out of their homes, their garage, the power was out, their garage doors didn't open, and so there's a lot of information through OES and through the sheriff to help with that. But the other thing I get asked is if we do evacuate, should we put a notice on our house so that they don't have to come to our house? Will you still be going door to door, or can it help you expedite evacuations if people put a notice, we've evacuated, so that you can?
I would suppose in the early onset, during the initial action phase of an incident, it could be helpful when it's a little bit more hasty before we can get surgical. But at the end of the day, we're going to be going house to house to make sure that it's vacated.
Well, I know a lot of folks want to help and understand that if they're able to get out, they should. And I think we saw that with South Lake Tahoe, how many people actually evacuated well in advance of being told to evacuate. And that really helped with those who couldn't or wouldn't, that we could identify and they could identify the jurisdictions working there. I appreciate that. And again, I appreciate any public information on YouTube videos. Here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it. I look at the Placer Alert website, it's great, and it's such a good tool for our public. Any additional voices, when they see your faces, they know to trust you and place their trust, and that's a lot of building trust and messaging to the public. So thank you for all your efforts, and thank you for all the town halls this year. We've done a lot of trying to get the word out to people, and we can always do more, and I love the idea of the postcard. We have a lot of second homeowners who aren't full-time and might forget. Sometimes they don't actually know which county they're in and where they live, and a postcard reminder to sign up, even when they're out of town, to know if what's going on. It would be helpful. So appreciate that. And then I did want to ask Jane about, or Dave, about the river fire. And we unfortunately did lose 47 homes, no lives. That was great. But where are we at in the recovery for those 47 that have lost their homes or lost their homes last year?
So we are, in terms of the private property debris removal program. Of course, your board remembers we did a local emergency, we did a local health emergency, and then we actually did an urgency ordinance. And then following that, we were able to become part of the state-run private property debris removal program. We have completed all of the residential properties. Everyone, whether they use the state program or they opted to do it on their own, have been cleaned up. There is one commercial property, and we're still working with the state to try to understand their eligibility. As soon as we have that figured out, our plan is actually to come back to the board and give you a final report. My understanding is we have 2 building permits that have been pulled, and I think another 3 are in review right now. So it's slow and steady, but coming back. We're not quite at the 1-year mark, so I'm grateful to be able to report that cleanup is done. We were able to mitigate many of the runoff and possible issues with things sediment that getting into the canal or the river. Thankfully that we only had the one real bad rainfall event there in October that really gave us a scare in terms of debris flow and things like that, although I hear we have some thunderstorms this afternoon, so I'm headed back to the EOC to get a check-in with National Weather Service on that. But coming along nicely in terms of the cost recovery, we did get a federal declaration on that one, and we've gotten most of our projects have been approved for FEMA. Things that didn't get approved through FEMA, actually we're working with the state to get what's called California Disaster Assistance Act on as well. Folks got a fair amount of what's called individual assistance, and then there are actually some fairly sizable SBA loans were approved as well. So, can't say that we're done. Unfortunately, it's a long process, but I'm pleased to say that given that we're not quite a year, we're actually doing pretty well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Suzanne, did you have another?
Just one other comment. I was going to say that as far as training your folks, on what courses to take for safety, Cindy, you hit on something when you said people with electric garage doors when they lose their electricity. Any part of the training that you could include to train those folks on how to disengage that electric garage door opener so they can open it manually. Maybe they want to make a little emergency card that tells them how to do it in their panic instead of trying to rely on their memory to do that. I'm just thinking it might help.
Absolutely. Jane, you had a follow-up?
Certainly. Thank you, Board Chair. Great credit to Dave and his team on debris removal. But for those who are interested in rebuilding, I wanted to advise our viewing public that Randall Beaufort or Tim Wagner in our Cedra Building Department are standing by with a process ready for river fire victims to go to the head of the line for rebuilding assistance. So please keep that in mind, and just close by saying great thanks to our public safety leaders for great information. I know our cities appreciate it. I met with them last week and very much appreciate being included in any advice, awareness, training, such as the OES session last week. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this item? No questions or comment. Well, again, on behalf of all of our residents, thank you, our public safety officials, as well as OES, for all the support to our communities. We really appreciate your leadership and risk that you take getting us out safely in these situations. And you prove it over and over again, and we can't be more grateful. So thank you.